Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Martz, and today I'm here to present One Student Story, my final presentation for the class Advanced Academic Achievement, or as I'll call it throughout this presentation, AAA. So today, for One Student Story, I'm going to go ahead and deliver my story. This semester, being spring of 2018, I took the course AAA. This course is given to students to allow them to be successful in everything that they're doing in college, whether it be studying, test taking, or just retaining and memorizing information that you need for your classes. Now, in this course, there was an assignment called Do One Thing Different this week. This assignment was a huge deal for me because it allowed me to think outside of the box, and it challenged me to use different methods than what I was originally using to be able to be successful in college. Now I'm going to start at the beginning of this story. At the beginning of this semester, I had a full load. This was my second semester back in college after a 10-year break from high school. So I needed to make sure that I was going to be successful in all of my classes, especially because this semester I was taking a full load. Now, one of my courses was a second-year course, and that's English 122. You have English 121, which is the first, and then English 122, which is the second, which was the one I was taking. Right from the beginning, I knew that I was going to struggle. The first two assignments that I did not do very well on. I was having a lot of issues with punctuation and grammar, and I was really struggling. And I had to face the decision of whether I was going to continue on with this course or if I was going to drop it and save it for a later time. This was a really big struggle for me because I knew that I needed to have this course to be able to proceed with my career and get my diploma. So I sat down and I thought to myself that I was going to take on the challenge, and I needed to make sure I had the correct tools to be able to be successful in this course. So what I knew I needed to do was I needed to make sure that I had my punctuation and my grammar up to par. I was definitely slacking because I didn't know very much about commas or apostrophes or anything like that. Now, this is where the Do One Thing Different this week comes in. This was the assignment we were given, and it was actually fitting perfectly for all of my different courses that I was having. Each week it seemed that every time I would do something different, I was able to put it into each one of my courses. So what I figured I would do is I would take this assignment and I would apply it directly to my English 122 class so that I'd be able to think outside of the box as well as gain the information I needed to be successful in this course. So the aspects that I took from this were reading, taking notes, organizing study materials, rehearsing and memorizing study materials, and writing. These were the major categories that I was going to use to remember the information that I needed. Each category had numerous different steps inside of it that you could follow. And I'm going to go ahead and go over each individual one that I did and how that pertained to the English class. So the first one I followed was reading. And what I did was I chose the section called Creating a Distributed Reading Schedule. Now what that was I took each individual piece and I broke it up into different reading schedules instead of doing them all at once to ensure that I wouldn't get overwhelmed. So the four that were the biggest deal for me were commas, semicolons, apostrophes, and colons. I really did not have the knowledge of the rules or the way that any of this punctuation needed to be used. So what I did was on Monday, I studied commas. Tuesdays, I did semicolons. Wednesdays, apostrophes, and Thursdays, colons. And then on Friday, I'd come together and I'd look over everything to make sure that I had a grand understanding of how it all worked together. Now, I had two separate resources that I used while I was creating my distributed reading schedule because I needed the information that I needed to read. So the Purdue OWL is a wonderful resource that's provided to us as college students that have all the different rules for each individual punctuation. So I used that to find the rules, and then I would study each one of those pages for each individual punctuation each day. Later on the slide, I do have an example of what that looks like. My second resource that I used was the Pikes Peak Community College OWL. The OWL is a wonderful program provided to Pikes Peak Community College students that allows you to upload papers that you've already written to get some tutoring advice without having to go in. The tutors on the background are absolutely wonderful, and they allow to give us some additional resources and point out places that we can improve our writing. This is a wonderful resource that was brought to my attention through my professor in English, as well as in the AAA class. And that seemed to be extremely helpful because as I was typing, I knew where I was going to put the information. The second piece was taking notes. I needed to make sure that I was understanding what I was reading. So each section I read, I took a note and I made an outline. So for number 1, I did the main topic, the subtopic, and then the supporting facts. So for example, what I did was I had the commas, and then my subtopic was the rules, and then my supporting facts, I used examples. So that as I was writing, I had something to refer back to, and that allowed me to actually transfer it into my paper, which was a huge help. The third piece was organizing study materials and tackling challenging subjects first. So as you've kind of noticed, I'm sure, throughout this presentation, I keep bringing up commas. I did not know anything about commas. I kind of was guessing where they went. I thought I knew maybe a tiny bit, but I actually knew nothing. So I needed to make sure that I was tackling that challenging subject first in order to make sure that that grand knowledge was relevant first. And the second one that I had a big difficulty with was apostrophes. So those two are the ones that I like to focus on as I was writing the paper to make sure that I was getting those in where they needed to be. And I took the information from my first category, and I made sure that I was going back to those notes as well as what I had read additionally from the Purdue OWL. Fourth was rehearsing and memorizing study materials, and then memorizing it by chunks. Now, as you can see here, this is an example of what we see on the Purdue OWL. And each individual one, this is the commas, so I'm very familiar with this page, has 9 different sections on what rules, where the commas can be used, what rules are to be applied when and when not to use commas. So what I did was I would start with rule number 1, and I would make sure that I had the rule number 1 memorized. And then after I had rule number 1, I'd move on to rule number 2. And I would do rule number 1, then rule number 2. Once I had those 2 chunks together, I'd move on to 3, 4, and then I went through all of the different rules. In grand total, there's actually 12 rules for this particular quick rules that you need to know for commas that I was able to do. The professor at the beginning of the year had provided us with a slideshow that he wanted us to watch a video, and it had said that a comma splice could ruin an entire paper. And that really blew my mind. One comma, missing one comma, could possibly ruin everything that I had wrote and spent lots and lots of time on. So this was a big deal that I made sure I memorized these rules so that I didn't miss one comma and ruin my entire paper. Finally, the last piece I incorporated into my writing was I needed to edit carefully. This was a really big deal because if I missed one thing, like I was saying, the comma splice, it could ruin my paper. Or if I wasn't following the proper procedures, it really could just throw the entire paper off. So the first point I'd like to make out is with this class, I actually ended up writing the longest paper that I've ever written, which is 12 pages long. If you think about 12 pages, that is a lot of material to cover. So what I needed to do was I needed to ensure that I had a solid system of how I was going to edit carefully and successfully. So what I did, my first thing that I did was I used the PPCC OWL, the Pikes Peak Community College OWL. I used that and I sent it in to have the tutors help me with where I could amp up and fix some grammatical and punctuational errors that I was having. The third piece that I went through was I focused on slowly rereading every single piece of this paper. So it's 12 pages long. I went word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, slowly and surely. And because I was fresh with how to use the commas because of all of the other steps I'd taken, or apostrophes, semicolons, I was able to make sure that I was not missing any information. And then as the backup, I had the PPCC OWL tutors to help me if they could point out, somewhere where I may have messed up. Now, this took forever. I will tell you, we had 3 weeks to write this entire paper, and every single day I sat down and went through different pieces of this paper to ensure accuracy, and because I edited carefully, I was able to be successful. Now, the outcome of this is astonishing. So, like I said, the 12-page paper was the longest paper that I've ever written. Because I followed these steps that OnCourse has provided for me, I'm actually going to get this paper published in Us Represented, which is a huge deal for me because nothing like that has ever happened to me in my life. I learned more about writing in just this one semester than I ever learned in my entire high school career. That is huge. By following these 5 different steps and applying myself and living by them, I was able to learn more in 1 semester than 4 years. I was not going to give up. I never gave up. I followed the process and I believed in the process. And because of that, I tried my hardest and I was successful. Being successful, not only did I get an A on the paper, but I now retain the knowledge that I needed to be successful further on throughout my life. Being, how to use commas, how to use these punctuation, how to use different grammar things, as well as I'm having a paper being published for students and, anybody to read that wants to read it. So in conclusion, what success means to me is being successful in what I believe in. It is a huge deal for me to be able to accomplish my dreams. Accomplishing my dreams would equal success, and my dreams being becoming a social worker, which is the degree I'm working at, and then as well passing down good morals and good ethics to my daughter. What I want my story to be like is I would like to become a social worker, and I'd like to change thousands of lives. I would like to help people get to where they want to be at. I'm going to make it there by never giving up. I am going to ensure that I always try my hardest and that I always give my 100%. And if I do face failure, I'm going to get up and I'm going to try again. And I'm never going to give up on my dreams. This shows that just by what I've explained here, it shows that I am going to be successful because I was able to get a 12-page paper published just by not giving up. So I know that what I've been taught works. This is my story, and I thank you so much for listening.